So tell me a little bit about, well, why we're standing here, Charlie. Where are we to begin with?
This is a peninsula, Harry. It's called the Chanonry Point. The area is called Chanonry. We've got the village of Rosemarkie over here, and then at the other side of the head of the peninsula, we've got Fortrose. This is quite a special area because the water out here, that's the open sea out that way. Inverness is back that way. But it's quite a complicated seabed shape.
Right.
It gets pretty deep in places. And when you get an incoming tide, you get lots of swirls and eddies and undercurrents. And the dolphins have learned over the years that this is a good place to come and just stay in the one position.
Right, okay.
And the actual migratory salmon come racing towards them in the tide. So it's actually not using energy when you don't have to.
Makes an easy meal.
It makes an easy meal. They get more benefit from it. But they also use it as a tool. They can use the tide as a tool once they've actually caught the salmon, because they don't have any hands.
Yep.
They can actually use the tide to actually bring the dead fish back into their mouth again. We sometimes see dolphins catching really big fish, and it might take them 40 minutes, 45 minutes to swallow them.
Yeah.
And so sometimes they'll actually regurgitate the fish because they don't feel it's comfortable down the throat. And each dolphin's different. They've got their own characters and their own little habits.
Yeah.
The one dolphin that we used to have here, who was famous for filming and photography for actually regurgitating huge salmon, Zephyr, she's actually down in the Clyde estuary at the moment.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they travel quite, so they're not just localised to
well, they used to be, but nowadays they're travelling further and further afield. And we've got a group of dolphins down in the Clyde estuary. We've got some dolphins over in the Danish coast. All the way around into the Baltic, and then all the way down east coast of Scotland.
Yeah.
But we've even got two of our local dolphins here. Honey, her and her 4-year-old calf are down in Weymouth Bay in Dorset.
Wow.
How's that? And this is all because people like yourselves, members of the public, wildlife enthusiasts, they're using social media to get this information passing backwards and forwards really quickly.
Pictures, I suppose.
Pictures, absolutely brilliant, yes. I mean, even if you're on some people are even on boats, maybe even just with mobile phones.
Yeah.
If you see a whale or a dolphin or a porpoise, it's always handy to mention it to somebody, whether it's whales.org or maybe a local wildlife group, then they can actually log that sighting down. And it gives a good idea about what's going on. And that's part of the job that I do here. I am part of the data collection machine for the population of bottlenose dolphins. But for the charity, I'm looking for 4 particular individuals. I'm looking for Charlie, I'm looking for Indigo, I'm looking for Rainbow, and I'm looking for Spirit out of the local dolphins that we have. Yeah. And these are dolphins that the public support us with by adopting and supporting. And it's great fun. It means you're doing a bit of filming, you're doing a bit of photography. You're also sometimes meeting supporters here as well. So no two days are ever the same. Yeah. It's all different.
So how long have you been shooting here? How long have you been involved with the dolphins here?
I've been working here since about 1996. I was studying dolphins before that along the east coast, but I was brought in to work at the Dolphin and Seal Research Centre at North Keswick, which is closed now. And we did a lot of hydrophone work there, both with dolphins and with seals. Yeah. And in my spare time, I would come down to Chanonry Point to get more dynamic pictures to use as interpretation. Because the pictures that were actually in the centre were all from Aberdeen University's field station up in Cromarty, and they were very good at providing photos. But the photos were all of dorsal fins, and the really dynamic, attractive, charismatic pictures that were very hard to come by. Yeah. So I basically just started taking my own, and as I got better and as the gear got better, then my pictures got better.
Right.
And I started getting known, and magazines started wanting to use my pictures. BBC Wildlife 2 front covers, that this kind of stuff. But it's also nice just to let people know that there are amazing species of wildlife out there that they can see without going out in the water, if you're
Yeah.
really not into boats or you're a bit uncomfortable on them, you can stand on land and actually do this. Being able to stand on a beach and watch dolphins 4 meters from you is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it's very, very
and
special.
The dolphins are just doing what they do. They're acting completely naturally. You're not interfering with them. They're not interfering with you. It's something pretty special. If you know what you're looking for, then you can actually tell the dolphins miles away, because the blow when they come to the surface to breathe is brilliant, because it's an absolute dead giveaway, because it doesn't look like anything else.
Yeah, it doesn't look like a white horse or...
No, it doesn't look like even maybe a tern diving in or something like that.
How far out would you be able to confidently pick one up with, say, the naked eye?
About Fort George.
At Fort George,
yeah,
right?
Fort George.
Fair
looking through this, maybe a bit further.
Yeah,
maybe a wee bit further than that. Out where that rig is there, that's probably your limit if you had a big scope or something like that, because we're starting to get a lot of heat haze now. And just that heat shimmer across the water surface, even on a windy day like this, it's hellish.
Yeah.
Really bad.
How many times in a week would you come here? How often do you come down, or do you have to come down?
It depends on what I'm trying to do. I try and come down 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe spend 5-6 hours just waiting on the beach. And sometimes that can be a really busy 6 hours. I mean, that can be the equivalent of a couple of days' work. You go home with umpteen memory cards absolutely stuffed full of pictures.
Those are the good days.
Now, those are the good days. The bad days, like this week, Tuesday and Wednesday, nothing. Sitting here from low tide until damn near high tide, just nothing appearing at all. And the dolphins have been sneaking in the late evening tide, so that suggests to me that some of the salmon that are coming in are actually running in the dark.
Right.
They're not running during the day in the morning tide. And this is one of these things. It's one of these, well, I mean, you know this about eagles and stuff, the way the wind blows, some like hunting in not so bright light. Some of them like hunting way up high. Others do the low stoop. The dolphins are the same.
Yeah.
The dolphins are the same, and they'll actually get to know the habits of the salmon. And it's us that's we're standing here watching nothing during the day.
Yeah.
But then in the evening, when it's probably too dark to even see them, or certainly too dark to photograph them, the dolphins are zipping around because they're following what the salmon are doing.
Yeah.
So you've got that direct link between the predator and the prey, and how it sometimes catches you unawares, and you're standing here wondering why there's nothing to film or photograph. But if you come back 12 hours later, they're probably going to be here. Being able to contribute to conservation and science through standing here, to me is a great. It's certainly what gets me out of bed in the morning. Especially if I'm doing something, I'm maybe working under a research license. Working to a protocol. Like if the guys up at the lighthouse, if they kidnap me and take me out in the survey boat all day, that's brilliant. That just, oh God, it's so good. Because everything's being done, and it's being done properly, and you know that it's for a reason, and you know that I mean, even although you're allowed to technically get a little bit closer to dolphins than other people because you're working under a license, you don't have to. The dolphins know the boat.
Yeah.
They know the boat so well, because the little rib that they've had it for over 20 years, 25 years,
very
and
familiar with it.
the dolphins know the sound. They know the sound, and they know it's not going to do anything stupid. So you've got dolphins will come along, and they'll actually come so close that you can hardly focus to get photo ID. Barbara Cheney, who's done her doctorate on the photo ID, on this whole photo ID project, she gets really annoyed at the dolphins now and again. She'll say, "Would you get back a bit?" She's got a 70 to 200.
They're not often you have that in wildlife.
She's got a 7D with a 70 to 200 on it, and it's got lasers set up. It's actually got a pair of tiny lasers that actually shine green dots onto the skin.
So she can get the same spot every single time.
The same spot, but it also measures the actual size of the dolphins.
Right. Wow.
Because she tries to take the pictures at the same distance from the boat all the time.
Yeah.
And they can actually get consistency through that. So it's fascinating, and they're coming up with different ideas all the time.
Yeah.
They come up with new stuff all the time. It's just, oh wow, I love it. we've learned so much in the last 30 years or so, you know. I mean, we know quite a lot about them physically because we've post-mortemed them, you know, and that kind of stuff. I mean, we know physically what makes them tick. But it's the social bit and it's the mental bit that's the real wow bit, you know. They've got such big brains and they've got, you know, they've got things that they do that really make you sit back and think, what on earth are you doing?
Yeah.
You know, they actually work things out and they go and they carry out a plan and they're annoyed if it doesn't work, same as us.
Yeah.
They're annoyed if it doesn't work. They're, you know, absolutely through the roof if it works, especially if it happens to be a hunting technique that they're using. And if they herd a big shoal of mackerel and everybody gets a good share of the mackerel, you know, yes, you know, job done. But if they go and do something and it doesn't work or they get interrupted doing it, you can really see them getting annoyed. I mean, they have these wonderful emotions that some people just think a dolphin's jumping out the water for jumping out the water's sake, but there's a reason behind it. It's like we use body language quite often unconsciously.
Yeah.
We use body language. Dolphins use body language consciously.
Right.
Because it's part of their communication repertoire, and it's something that I love to study. This is my thing.
Yeah.
Watching what dolphins do, why do they do it? Do they do it again and again and again? Who do they do it with? Do they do the same thing when they're on their own, or is it only in a group? And eventually you begin to just lift the lid, just that little bit. Okay. But we'll never know it all, and I don't ever want to know it all, because part of the mystery that they have is that there is such a mystery now and again that we don't know certain things about them.
How well are you able to predict where a dolphin's suddenly going to leap out of the water, or even now is it still point and shoot and a bit of luck?
Well, there's a lot of luck involved in it, but over the years you get to know the dolphins that can spark off each other. Okay. The characters.
So it's knowing that, being able to ID the individuals.
It helps. It helps. It's not infallible, it's not foolproof. Fast reactions are really required. Yeah. And my reactions are getting slower and slower all the time these days, as is my eyesight's getting poorer as well. But actually looking at specific dolphins that you know from looking at them for years and years, you've got a funny feeling that one is going to start sparking off the other one. Okay. And you think, right, keep an eye on those two, because they're chasing each other. And then the next thing you know, all hell breaks loose, and you've got a couple of 3.5 metre, 400 kilogram dolphins coming out the water towards you, you know. And it's basically just try to get them somewhere in the middle of the frame, and just try and get the camera to focus on the dolphins and not the sea. Yes. Yeah. Which is, you know, nine times out of 10, that's the real problem, you know.
You know, I've got, say, a 500mm lens with me here, but zoom lenses and 100 to 400, 100 to 500, you prefer to have that?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have the 600 f4s and the 500 f4s, but at the moment I don't really need them. I find that I'm able to do both land work and boat work with the likes of the 100 to 500s with a mirrorless. I changed over from the 1DX2s and stuff just to save weight, really. Yeah. I've got crumbling joints in my leg, and because of COVID, the operations have been put back. So I've just been trying to lighten the load as much as I can. And I'm finding that I'm getting just as good results with the advance in sensor technology and the advance in lens technology. I'm actually quite delighted with the results. Especially the likes of the Canon equipment here, the R3 and the compressed RAW. Yeah. The CR3 files are wonderful. Yeah. They're absolutely wonderful. And with the R5 as well. I mean, I can run that R5 with this lens down here, run it on 1.6 crop, and that's the equivalent of 700mm. Yeah. You know, which is excellent. In such a compact, lightweight package. You know. So technology's taking over nowadays. A friend of mine yesterday just received his Nikon 800mm f6.3. Yeah. And what a beautiful bit of equipment that is. Yeah. And light as a feather. I mean, an 800 mil. I mean, you and I used to carry that sort of stuff, and you would need a wheelbarrow to carry it. But nowadays, because of the technology and everything's getting lighter, okay, the exotic materials that they're using mean that the cost is going up. But if you're doing it for a living as we are, then I think it's worth it. It's worth the investment. Now, we do actually have a dolphin away out there. I just saw a tiny bit of a dorsal fin. Almost in line with that rig thing that's away out there in the distance, out where the water's getting quite choppy, in line with the point of the fort. I'm pretty sure there's a fin out there. Let me just.
I'm starting to know how people feel when I take them out to see eagles.
And
spot an eagle 3 miles away because I've got absolutely didn't see that at all.
Yeah. No, it's the way that the spray was. The dolphin was travelling along quite quickly,
and water just catches it.
Yeah, and the way that the dolphins actually come along, then the tip of the dorsal fin gives this lovely plume of spray, and it's not like the tip of a wave just getting blown. It's completely different. It's in a completely different direction.
So what tips would you have for people that want to come here and have the best chance at spotting something? Is there a particular time of year, particular time of day?
Try and get yourself down here in the summertime. Try and find out the local tide times, and remember about British summertime. That can actually be quite important. An hour doesn't sound much in the grand scheme of things, but sometimes that hour actually can be quite important, because there might be dolphins here at low tide and they're just waiting, and you'll get the best view of them because they'll only be a couple of feet off the beach. And then if the dolphins are in the distance, then you can actually watch them travelling around, and they might be having a bit of a social between themselves. Even in the winter time, I mean, you will see stuff here in the winter, but it can be a long wait, and it can be a very cold wait as well.
It's bad enough weather in the summer, so I'm not sure I'd want to come and sit here on a...
But even sitting in the car park with a pair of binoculars and just scan around, it's amazing what you can see. We do occasionally get some of the bigger whale species coming in.
They were killer whale off through the channel here a couple of years ago, weren't they?
Yeah, that's right. We had two of the West Coast population orcas just out there, just in line with the airport. I was back at home in Inverness, and the old chap that we were talking to on the wall, Francis, actually phoned me up. And he said, "Charlie, there's something down here." He says, "It's a wild day." It was like today, a wild day. He says, "But there's a couple of big dorsal fins." He says, "I don't think they're our dolphins." And so I jumped in the car from Inverness and came down, and I could hardly stand up to take the pictures. The 500 mil f4 was no use at all, so I had to use the 100 to 400. And I managed to get some pictures of W01 John Coe and W08 Aquarius out here. And it was wonderful to see them. I put a back of a camera shot up on Twitter, and then everything went nuts.
I remember seeing that. Yeah,
there was like a couple of thousand people all around here, and they hung about for a while.
It's quite a quiet day today, relatively. But it can get busy here, presumably.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I had about 200 people with me. I didn't realise it at first. I turned round and I thought, "Oh God, where the hell did all you lot come from?" But there was a university minibus that dumped off a whole load of students, and they came down and they were actually listening to what I was saying, and we ended up getting a really nice conversation, because they were doing oceanography, they were doing climate change and stuff, So I was giving them a mac and a tuppence worth about what was going on locally about that. And that the seas are warming up, and that everything is going into colder water further away. So we're losing species in this area that are just having to travel north to try and get food. And it's possibly what's happening to the salmon. The salmon are having to travel so far north, and if you've maybe got people that are hoovering up all the sand eels that they would probably eat, then there's a chance that the salmon are actually starving to death. And that's why so many aren't coming back now. But it's a direct driver to what happens to the dolphins. It's one of these vectors that you can't separate them.
Everything's interlinked, and
predator and prey has got to be together. No, I really like these lenses. I mean, some people are saying, oh, you know, they're f7.1 at the long end, and then when you put a converter on, they're f9, you know, f10. So what? So what? I could quite easily be down here at 9 o'clock at night doing dolphins at 4,000 or 5,000 ISO.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell the difference. Unless you zoom in like 200% or something like that.
I think there's still this fear among many photographers about raising the ISO above 1600, and
I get asked a lot by people, you know, oh, my dolphin pictures are never really very sharp and this kind of thing. What do you use? What do you use? And I'm actually quite open, you know. I said, with animals like dolphins, I said, you've got to have speed. You know, so make sure your shutter speed's up at least 1,000th, if not more.
Yeah.
My personal settings that I use on land and on the boat are pretty much exactly the same.
Yeah. It's not really for your movement, even on a boat. It's the dolphins that are going quickly.
It's the dolphins, and also some of the settings are actually species specific as well.
Right.
For bottlenose dolphins, these aren't tremendously fast dolphins. They're fast enough, especially when they're moving quickly and they're maybe breaching out the water. So you've got to have enough shutter speed to actually freeze them in mid-air. So you've got to have at least 1,000th of a second. I prefer to use a 1,600th.
Yeah.
That covers everything. That covers photo ID for the dorsal fins, because people don't realise that when the dolphins come to the surface, although it doesn't look as though it's taken very long to do it, your actual centre of rotation of the dorsal fin is actually quite fast, and you'll get the back of the dolphin will be lovely and sharp, but the dorsal fin will be slightly blurred just because of that rotational movement. So that's why I tend to choose at least a 1,600. And then if they start going bonkers, if they start really socialising, then I'll maybe up the shutter speed to about a 2,000.
Yeah.
And I tend to just let the auto ISO take care of that, and just let the lens take care of the aperture. It's less for me to worry about.
Exactly.
And I can just concentrate on trying to get these fast-moving, dynamic animals right in the middle of the frame if I possibly can.
So are you shooting in shutter priority with auto ISO or in manual?
Yeah, pretty much manual, but I'll sometimes change over. It just depends on what I'm doing. Like if I'm maybe over on the west coast and I'm maybe out from Skye, going across to like Sakana or something like that, then we'll maybe get common dolphins coming alongside, and those are much nimbler, fast dolphins. I'll put the shutter speed up to about a 2,500th. Just to get them sharp, and you also get beautiful water droplets at that speed. It's really nice. But no, I mean, horses for courses, and we're always trying to keep the ISO as low as we can. But nowadays, we don't really need to bother too much about that.
It's just another tool to use and embrace.
I would rather get a high ISO shot that's a little bit noisy than not get the shot at all.
Exactly.
Especially if it's maybe a rare species, or from my point of view, if it's a dolphin, if it's an individual dolphin that I maybe haven't seen for a couple of years, then that to me, I would rather have a noisy picture that I can recognise the individual in than not have a picture at all. And again, it's just the shutter speed and just being able to balance what's going on.
Yeah.
Another question I get asked quite a lot is, Charlie, you can only use the one arm. How do you manage to take pictures?
Yeah.
Well, I was involved in a bad accident many years ago, and it knocked out the use of this arm. And cameras, as you probably well know, it seem to be made for right-handed people.
Yeah.
So what I've learned to do over the years, and it's something that I started very early on with, and Alistair Bowie from Ford's, who used to work in Inverness in a different camera shop then, he sold me my first pro camera, a film camera, an EOS 1, and I suddenly realised that I needed a battery grip, because I needed that second shutter button. Rather than trying to do this all the time, what I can do is I can look through the shutter, I can look through the eyepiece, and I can actually just use these two fingers to control that, or control the switches. but it's something you got to learn.
Yes.
Your brain has got to learn this.
Yeah.
It's something that I sometimes teach as well. I'll maybe get a small group of disabled photographers that will come down and try and pass on my kind of bitter experience to them, and it's lovely to be able to help somebody else, able-bodied or not. I mean, there's no great secret to this. It's not. You're not letting away any top secret information here. It's just taking photos.
Yeah.
So and I always think, as you guys do, it's just nice to be nice.
Yeah.
Share a bit of your knowledge and share a bit of your enthusiasm as well. But I mean, I've heard it down here. I've had some kind of like amateur photographers. I don't tell anybody my settings. Well, more fool you.
Yeah.
More fool you, really.
Do you find that it can, especially if it's a bit busier, that it gets a little bit competitive down here with people?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, we get bad tempers and people, stamping their feet and shouting at each other. And you got in my road and all this kind of stuff. I even had a guy throwing his camera down on the sand and jumping on it.
Wow.
Yeah, the battery went dead. I said, well, it's not the camera's fault, it's your fault for not having a spare battery in your pocket, is it? Or a spare memory card or a spare film or whatever it is.
We've all made those mistakes, yeah.
It's the thing with cameras and wildlife, it would be great if it wasn't for the people.
Yeah. You must have seen such an array of behaviours out here. Is there a particular moment that sticks in your mind of a piece of behaviour that you totally missed, you totally cocked up and you didn't capture?
Well, probably about 15 years ago. I was down here and it was a windy day, and it was at the end of August coming into September. And we knew that there were mackerel in the area because the dolphins were beginning to change their behaviour. They were changing their strategies. They weren't too bothered about salmon anymore. Right. They were actually herding shoals of fish. And something happened out here. It was actually quite a thundery day. It was an afternoon and the light was lovely, but it was getting darker because the clouds were getting really, really thundery. And there was this big rumble of thunder and a flash of lightning away behind us. And I kid you not, I had about 10 dolphins at the same time jump out the water completely. And I've never seen that before or since. I don't know what was going on.
Yeah.
And there's no way you could fit it all in with a big telephoto lens. I think I had a 600 f4 or something at that point. And it was absolutely incredible. I've never seen it again. The most I've ever seen, dolphins maybe in mid-air at the same time is about 6 or 7. But this was in double figures, and they were all doing exactly the same thing. It was almost coordinated. Now, whether it was anything to do with the thunder or the lightning, or whether it was a strategy for hunting, which I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was. I think it was the sound of 10 big bottlenose dolphins crashing back into the water, and maybe scaring the fish into one area.
Yeah.
Because the gannets were going bonkers as well. The gannets were going mental as well. That's the tide running now. You can see the tidal intrusion front's beginning to push its way in. As I said before, the actual seabed shape around here is really unusual. It's highly varied. But what you do have are you've got 3 quite deep channels. You've got a deep channel just offshore here at the point. Then halfway between us and Fort George, we've got the shipping lane, which is the deepest bit. Yeah. It's about 130 feet, something like that.
Deep, wow, really?
Yeah, just offshore here, it's about 70 feet. It drops off really, if you're here at the very lowest tides of the year, you're actually looking at a cliff face.
Wow, yeah.
It drops right off. And the same thing happens over at Fort George. So you've actually got 3 deep channels, and sometimes the salmon will switch where they're running from. They'll run round the corner at Fort George, and you know that they're running at Fort George because the dolphins make a beeline for over there. Or all the stuff's happening out in the shipping lane, which is about 600 metres away, because it's about 1.2 kilometres between us and the fort. So it's about 600 metres away. And trying to get photographs of dolphins at 600 metres sometimes can be tricky.
Yeah. You start to introduce the heat haze.
But it's nicer when the dolphins have actually detected that salmon are running here, because you can set your gear up and it can be
right there.
You almost think you can touch dolphins.
Yeah.
You almost think you can touch them.
What would you say your favourite conditions are to shoot in, light-wise or weather-wise?
Not too bright, not too sunny. I really need to see the skin on the dolphin in its true colours. Now, dolphins are quite highly varied. The different species of dolphins are quite, as you know, they're quite different in appearance sometimes. The likes of the common dolphins, they have that nice tan yellow patch on the side. Bottlenoses don't. Bottlenoses have got quite simple graded colour, just counter shading that goes from almost dark grey, almost black on the dorsal fin, down to light grey at the side, and then the white stomach. Yeah. Well, I like to see all that because dolphins, like us, get skin conditions, and they the way we recognise the dolphins with the dorsal fins pick up graze marks and scuff marks, but also bite marks from each other. Yeah. And that's what I'm trying to do down here. I'm trying to get records of each dorsal fin. Once I've got all the dolphins that are in the area with the dorsal fins, if I get decent pictures of each of them, then I'm quite happy. But from a kind of sciencey, geeky point of view, some of these skin conditions and actual almost sometimes like rashes and abscesses and things that dolphins can get, some other scientists want to see that. Yeah. And if I can get a close-up picture, maybe with the likes of the R5 or something like that, get a good big megapixel picture of that, they can look at that. But they also like to see the actual colour. Yeah. And bright sunshine tends to give you a little bit of glare off it. So I actually prefer slightly muted conditions. Not too windy. A little bit of wind, given a little bit of wave there, will actually give the autofocus something to lock on. Right. But you don't want it locking on the wave and not locking on the dolphin. But that's just practice and just a bit of luck. People gathering, so surely that means something's about to happen. Well, people have been taking the advice about the low tide and the rising tide, so we're starting to get pictures. So you better get set up. I know it sounds a bit big-headed, but I'm a bit of a trendsetter down here. The minute I start bringing something down, then everybody starts bringing them out. Nowadays, nobody had one of these. Yeah, I mean, I've not seen them used. No, nobody had one of these. I brought one of these down and started sticking it on the top and using it. And 2 weeks later, 5 or 6 photographers all started bringing these down. Charlie's got a gimbal head, let's have a gimbal head. Charlie's got a big Gitzel gimbal head, let's have a big Gitzel gimbal head, Charlie's got a camouflage cover on, let's have a camouflage cover on, You're like, oh my giddy aunt. I was a bit wary of buying the R3 at first. I mean, the R5, they will need to bury me with that. That is one of the best cameras I have ever used. It is a beautiful bit of kit. It really is. This R3, I love it. I really, really love it. And I love it because of one thing, and that's the eye control autofocus. Not eye detect autofocus, but eye control autofocus. Because I can only use the one hand, trying to adjust focus points and stuff for me is really quite a chore, and I quite often miss what's going on by having to do that. Some people might think, it's only moving a little button now and again, but in the heat of the action, when something is only happening for a split second, when it's only happening for a split second, and the minute I tried this up at Fords and Beaulieu, I was absolutely blown away. I thought, oh my God, this is going to change how I work, and it does. And not just for dolphins, Harry, not just for dolphins. It can even be just composing the pictures if you're doing a landscape. It's technically not a landscape camera, but it takes lovely files. They're only 24 megapixel, and I wish it had the 45 megapixel sensor of the R5 in it, but hey, I'll take this any day of the week. So it's enough, probably enough for most people. It's enough for most people. What I sometimes find is that I would always love that little bit more if the dolphins are that little bit further away, so that I could crop in that just that little bit more. But we're always wanting more. Nothing's ever perfect, so. But it'll be interesting to see what the R1's like when they come out. If the R1 has got the eye control focus, I might go for that, because that'll probably be
large
huge megapixels, and that'll be it. That'll be the perfect camera. Pretty much, yeah, pretty much.
So you must have, out of all the many years you've been photographing here, a standout moment, a favourite image that you've got.
Well, over the years you end up building up a bank of pictures that tend to go to image libraries and that kind of stuff. But as far as personal favourites go, you can pick out a few. And the thing is that when you're photographing these dolphins, when you're looking at the pictures, maybe even years later on, you can remember that exact moment. That's what dolphins seem to do to you. A few years ago, my friends from Aberdeen University's field station at Cromarty and we were out on the research boat, and we were out away in the distance near that yellow buoy. It's just off the edge of a sandbank.
Yeah.
And we had some dolphins cruising around, and there was a bit of social interaction going on. We had some of the adult males and some of the sub-adult males were going about in a gang, and just like teenage boys, they're just up to mischief. They're just up to no good. And it's a group that I tend to call the Bad Boys Club. Yeah. And we had them, and they weren't that far away from the boat. And we were just sitting quite quietly, just watching what they were doing. And they calmed down for a minute or two, and then all hell broke loose. And just happened to be pointing in the right place at that right time. And the camera managed to get some of the sequence beautifully in focus and nice light, but I had 4, possibly even 5 dolphins coming out the water at the one time, all together. It was coordinated. It was absolutely beautiful to watch, and thankfully I managed to keep my finger rattling on the button, just keeping the motor, just keeping that drive going. And out of the 15 or 20 frames that came out of that, there's 1 or 2 absolutely pin-sharp.
That's all you need.
Pictures, and you've got the Black Isle landscape in the background, and the light was just beautiful, and you can see the craziest tiny detail on the body of the dolphins as well. So you can identify which dolphins are up in the air, which is a luxury, which is really nice. And that's probably one of the best sort of pictures that I can really remember taking. But it's very subjective. It's very subjective. I sometimes get this with other people that study dolphins and things. They say, "Oh, 1 or 2 of your dolphin pictures look really, really personal and really, there's something going on.
Yeah.
There's always something that comes out in your pictures. It's maybe because I'm not photographing the ones that are leaping about. I'm actually getting 2 dolphins that are maybe chumming each other along, and you just get this lovely magic coming out.
Yeah.
It's not always about jumping dolphins. It's not always about breaching and stuff. You get a lot of social interaction between individual animals, and once you get to know them, you'll know the ones that are actually good to just study for a while.
As with any subject, the better you know them, you
get favourite otters, you get favourite eagles, things like that. Trying to explain it to some people sometimes is a bit difficult, because all they want is a shot of a jumping dolphin. But to be quite honest, half the time they're looking at the wrong dolphins.
Yeah.
And the ones they should be looking at are the ones that are going to give you really spectacular stuff. And so they're quite happy getting a couple of dolphins bumping into each other halfway out the water, and thinking that that's breaching. No, breaching is when they're like kind of 4 meters in the air. That's proper breaching.
So we've got pretty much a set viewpoint here, as it were, that we most often see the dolphins from. But does that mean you're quite restricted in how you can compose your pictures, what you like to include background-wise, and where you want the light to try and fall in your images?
Yeah, depending on what time of day the tides are running can make quite a difference. I mean, at the moment we're here, and the light is in front of us technically, so from a photographic point of view that's not very brilliant, but all we need to do is move a few degrees one way, and then the dolphins will be lit up nicely. If we wait for later on today, when the tide's coming in the evening, then we'll have the sun at our back. Technically that would be the best time to actually do it. But you can make use of what you've got, and the light, of course, is so important. Trying to get the details on the dolphins, whether it's the faces, whether it's the dorsal fins, you need nice light. But you can also utilise maybe backlighting to your advantage. You can get, like today, if we look just out that way towards the airport, that sparkly water. If you get a group of dolphins coming along through that, and they're venting, and the spray is coming out their blowhole, in that windy, sparkly kind of sea.
Beautiful.
Absolutely gorgeous. So you can make arty pictures out of what would technically be not ideal lighting to try and actually see the dolphins, because the dolphins are going to come out as silhouettes. But as I say, all you've got to do is move a few degrees, and over here the light is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's just knowing it's knowing your own location pretty well, and knowing what times of day to maybe come and hopefully start doing stuff. But sometimes you get caught out. Like at the moment, we've got a big bank of cloud coming right overhead, so that's dulling everything right down again. And sod's law, that's technically when dolphins will go absolutely bonkers, and you end up with some very dull-looking dolphins leaping about. But you just get to take the good with the bad.
Absolutely.
But thankfully, here, because we're in quite an exposed location, the weather tends to blow over us quite quickly, so you're never actually stuck that long with bad light. You're always going to get a break in the clouds, and you'll get a little bit of leeway for exposures. But photographing the sea can actually be quite difficult. People quite often come away with very dark photos. Their exposures are a bit low. Their metering maybe isn't quite what it should be. And it's just a matter of practice. I generally run, for most of the time I'm down here, I'll run maybe a third or 2/3 overexposure. But again, just depending on what's going on. And if, for instance, the light is hitting us now and the dolphins were over there, I would take that. I would actually take that exposure compensation off. In fact, I might even start dipping down into minus a third or maybe minus 2/3. It just depends, especially with young dolphins that are a very white colour, very pale colour. They will, against a dark sea, they will really blow out, and so you've really got to be careful with your exposures there. But that's just practice, really. That's just complete practice.